This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Trigger warnings. There may be mentions of abuse, sexual assault, and suicide within this episode. Some elements may be distressing, so listener discretion is advised. And if you need support during or after listening, there are resources in the show notes.
And that job to me it wasn't a job, it was a love to stand alongside police officers in some of the hardest times that they've gone through. And many times that it was a saving of a life, because a lot of them I've talked to were suicidal or homicidal in some cases. I never lost one.
I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that finds the good in the midst of the bad. Each episode, we meet someone who's had a bit of a hard time, but has found hope and healing along the way, and hopefully they inspire you to embrace the good in your world too. Episode 36, Mel Baker. Part 3 of 4. Mel Baker is the kind of person that's hard to describe in an introduction. She's been through more in half her life than most people can hope to experience in 20, both good and bad. We're halfway through Mel's incredible story, so if you haven't listened to the previous 2 episodes, go and do that before you go any further. So far, we've heard of Mel's remarkably difficult childhood, filled with abuse and homelessness. But at the age of 17, her life changed from a singular verse in the Bible. Mel has a heart for people, working in the mission field in Papua New Guinea, attending Morling College for 4 years, before working in aid and development in Baptist World Aid, a job which took her all over the world. Mel's story is set to drastically change again when she embarks on a journey as a chaplain. Let's get back into it. After you finished up with Baptist World Aid, where was the next step from there?
So I served 5 years with them, and I felt like I had given everything I could to that role, and that toll had caught up with me, and I felt really called at that point into again more evangelism work and education. I'd finished my Masters of Adult Education at UTS while I was working for Baptist World Aid. And so that education kept on singing from the time I went to Morling and had done that over that time in Baptist World Aid as well. But I really felt like, I've got to move back into education, evangelism, and a voice to help those who feel powerless and voiceless, and along the same lines, but in Australia. I needed some grounding. And I've always wanted to join the police, and I feel like in many ways God had a sense of humour from my time on the street and a few brushes with the law as a teenager. I was like, you're one day going to work with these police officers, and I was like, yeah, you really got a sense of humour there. So I did training actually at Morling. On my 4th year, you could do a specialised training, and so I chose police chaplaincy back then. But you had to be 5 years in ministry full-time before you could be a police chaplain, and it's a volunteer role. So I waited those exact 5 years, I suppose, and joined up straight away. And I remember my first day, I was at Burwood Local Area Command, what was called then. And I was sitting in this meeting, and first police meeting, and all the things that was going on, and I thought, how many guns are in this room? That was like my first response to such a different meeting, like from where I'd been. And then now sitting in a place where everyone's in uniform, I'm in uniform, but noticeably as a chaplain, as a police chaplain. And those early days, those people in the command at Burwood really set me up well again to a really fruitful ministry as a police chaplain. And again, I wasn't just a volunteer for a day a week like most of the chaplains were. Within a year or two, I went into being the lead chaplain in post-trauma support across the whole of New South Wales. So I still carried Burwood as my local area, and then I was part of helping with other ex-police officers setting up the police trauma groups across New South Wales. So we set up 3 at that stage, and I travelled to every one of them every month and supported those people. I went over to Richmond, St John of God, where a lot of police officers are sent to in their trauma to help them. And so I visited them once a week over there. And that job to me it wasn't a job, it was a love to be alongside, stand alongside police officers in some of the hardest times that they've gone through. And if I can bring any healing or speak into their lives in a way that saves their life. And many times that it was a saving of a life, because a lot of them I've talked to were suicidal or homicidal in some cases. And I never lost one. There were hundreds of police stories I have in my head, and I always had a way to capture their story that they never have to share that again with me, that I will always remember. I'll never say anything to anyone else. They're very confidential, but they will be in my head, and then we can always then come back to wherever they need to. And I always felt that it was important. And it was something, I think, from my own compartmentalization as a child, I was able to push aside and not gather people's stories and hold on to them. So I could go home and leave them like all in my filing cabinet in my head and then pull them out when I needed to. And I wasn't consumed by them like a lot of people might find. So I loved that role. And whilst I say I wanted to go into evangelism, it wasn't, a chaplain I see is not about that. But what happens as a chaplain, and I don't think a lot of people actually understand this, is that your faith and your walk comes through in what you do. You don't need to speak about it. You don't need to bring that out in any way. But I see a chaplain more as being proactive in pre-counselling sessions. So we're walking alongside them in a very vulnerable place sometimes, and we're just there listening, guiding, sustaining, doing all the pastoral care stuff we taught and that I was then teaching, because at this time I was also teaching back at Morling in pastoral care with John Reed. I was then the lecturer at School of Christian Studies for chaplaincy and pastoral care. So I was doing that part-time and the police part-time. And then I started my doctorate in 2004 as well in the area for 5 years. And that took me to police forces all around the world.
Can we just pause here for a minute to admire Mel? Part-time chaplaincy. That didn't seem very part-time when you're literally saving lives. Part-time lecturing, doing a PhD, all at the same time. Meanwhile, I'm struggling to make dinner every night. What an incredible woman. As Mel said, her doctoral studies took her to police forces all around the world. New Zealand for a year, and then, most notably, in 2008, Northern Ireland.
Police officers had never talked about their experience at all of all the conflicts they've worked through over there with the IRA. And for 30 years, some of the police officers hadn't shared their life story with me in about 3 hours. And at the point said to me, I've never even shared this with my wife. I've never talked about this. And then I said, well, that's what a chaplain's all about, is that we're here for you in whatever capacity you need. If you need that listening to that guiding, sustaining, we're here, we're reconciling, whatever you need. And all of them said, I feel so much better now that I've just shared that. And because I wasn't from the area, so it didn't matter if I was Protestant or Catholic, in that conflict in Northern Ireland. And the commissioner loved it so much. He actually saw change in police stations over there and the way that officers were carrying on with their work after they had shared with me as I travelled around their little country. And he actually offered me a role. Can you start chaplaincy here? We need your support. And I said, absolutely. Wow, yes, I don't want to go back to Australia to my marriage. And when I knew that it was totally ending at that point. And I thought, yeah, I could finish my doctorate from there, no problem. And then the global financial crisis happened right at that point. So it wasn't meant to be. So I was sent back home. A month home and back to New South Wales Police and all that I was doing before and lecturing and everything like that. And there's going to be other opportunities. I thought that's fine. And then I did a beautiful police wedding on the Murray River. And I came back from there on a plane, and the next day I couldn't breathe. And what do? I go to my appointment to see my supervisor in city at the university. I'm like, I can't breathe at all. My lung is absolutely like I'm suspecting I've got a blood clot in my lung, but I'm ignoring it because no, I've got to see my supervisor. I've got an appointment. And that morning I actually had to see my police chaplain, my senior police chaplain as well in the city. So I saw him and he's like, I'm really worried about you, Mel. Like, you need to go to the emergency now. Like, this meeting can stop. And I'm like, oh, no, I've got to wait till 2 so I can see my supervisor. And then I'll go to the hospital, okay? And then my parking, I went to the supervisor, I got through that. And then my parking was, if I waited another half hour, it would be $10 and not $23. So I was really bad at caring for myself. And I just continued to live in this future and going, I do this, I've got to achieve this, I've got to do that. And then I went to hospital. I drove myself to hospital after that, like worse than I was in the morning, and was taken straight in, no questions asked really. They knew exactly what was the problem.
Mel's hunch was right. It was a blood clot in her lungs. If she hadn't gone to the hospital when she did, the clot could have travelled to her brain and she wouldn't have survived.
Got all the scans done and was there for a few days, and then they sent me home, and my husband at the time was in New Zealand working. And the nurse would come and give me Clexane injections and other things to make sure that I was okay every day. And the third day she came and she was really worried. She's like, no, I'm driving you actually back to Royal North Shore Hospital. You're not in a good space. And the hospital put me in intensive care. And I was, a friend came over and the doctors said to her, I don't think she's going to last. And so my friend rang my husband and said, you got to come home from work. Like, you can't stay in New Zealand. She may not survive this. And then his answer was, no, I got to do the work. And that told me everything about where our marriage was at. That I wasn't even not anything important to him. And my friend was beside herself. She was we were at a Baptist church by then, and she was she couldn't work it out. Like, why would you be like that? Obviously, I survived.
Yes, you're talking to me.
I got through the night, and I had to sit for 3 months and not do anything after that when I got home. Sitting in a chair and could hardly walk to the bathroom without having a real breathing attack. And I still had police officers. I remember I had police officers calling me still on my emergency line saying I'm suicidal, and I'm sitting there feeling a bit like them.
Yeah.
Because they're struggling every day, but I still talk to them because I really felt like they were important. I wasn't important. I was still really carried that from my childhood. That's when I realised I needed to work in therapy on all that I had gone through.
After Mel recovered, she did just that, started therapy for the first time ever. She'd spent her life looking after others, putting herself dead last, but she knew that she couldn't do that anymore. But it wasn't an easy process. Mel had to unlearn everything she had learned as a child in order to protect herself so that she could create healthier coping mechanisms moving forward.
The psychologist who I went through to for about 3 sessions, I really didn't get on with her. She was far too clinical for me. But she did teach me one thing. She said, to be in the present moment, you start off with those little things. So like while you're washing the dishes, just draw your focus to scrubbing that plate and that movement. And then do it too when you're cleaning your teeth, when you're washing your hair, doing all those sort of simple little tasks that we do every day and often don't even think about it, and just training that mind to keep coming back to what you're doing. And I did that, well, really hard in the beginning, but it was really took me probably 2 years before I didn't have to focus on that anymore. I could just, it was natural. It just came naturally to me. And that was all good timing, because by the time I was 40, I knew that I had to stop this marriage. I had to find myself by leaving, because I had changed so much in that time. But he hadn't. He was still treating me as the 21-year-old. And so every time I was in the marriage, I knew, once I started learning this present moment thing, I knew that I was being pulled back. Every time we were together, I was being pulled back to my past when I'm trying to be present and not be future orientated and get away from my past and run away from it. And then I realized, the only way to do this is really that we got to separate. So we had a beautiful separation in so many ways. Hard, like anything is, but we went away as friends.
Mel was now ready to focus on herself. Freshly 40, she was so excited to see where it led her.
At 40, it was like, this is the first day of the rest of my life. I really felt that.
Wow.
Even though I had some beautiful moments in my 30s and I'd finished my doctorate, so then I became a Reverend doctor, and I was like loving everything that I was doing. I was respected for that too, which is great. And then it was time, I got no one to be supportive of. Like, I can't do all these part-time jobs and volunteer work now. I need finances to live. And so I became a little bit homeless for a while, and a few people picked me up on friends' couches and stuff, so I didn't have to live on the streets again, which was nice. And then I found a rental because I got offered a job in the Australian Federal Police for 3 days a week, and then still do lecturing, still do New South Wales Police, and then do 1 day at RAF Richmond. So that was the way things were going. And I'm like, I really want a full-time job. I just want one job. And I thought the way that I could stay the most focused was one job. And then the Navy came in and said, you've just finished a doctorate in chaplaincy. You've been working in the police as a chaplain for 7 years now. You've had the widest experience in education. We've got all these old people, no females. We need you.
And that was that. Mel had wanted a full-time job and one came knocking right on her door. So, in 2011, Mel joined the Royal Australian Navy. And even though she was a chaplain, she also had to train as a naval officer.
It was absolutely incredible, amazing, everything that I loved it to be in the beginning. And I served in submarines my first year. They could see my investigation and communication and writing skills, and they utilised that, the captains that I worked for. I went into the submarine for a month, the first chaplain that has ever, I think I'm the only chaplain ever that has served and posted to a submarine for a period of time because they needed a female officer. I ended in submarines far too early. I was supposed to have been in the posting for 3 years, and I was just absolutely loving this small community of 500 and getting to know them. In the year, I got to know every one of their names and their people, and hung out with them in off times as well as on base. In the submarine, it was fantastic. And then I was moved because there was no other chaplain that could go on a ship that's going to the Middle East. And it's a tour I wanted to do. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to, change now? But one thing in the Navy is you just carry on with what you go through. And so I carried on, and I joined a ship and did all the workouts for the Middle East, which is the highest level of training that you could go through, because you're learning to be a firefighter and, taking out gas and explosions and everything like that on the ship as well. And my role was to also to care for people, do last rites and anything like that. So you're sort of doing 4 to 6 hour full-on training times where your ship's being blown up and flooded, and you got to do all the things you got to do to get through that. And sometimes you don't get any sleep, and you're at the worst case scenario. So as if you're going to be in the war. So you're trained at a very high rate, which we need to be. You're in a ship, you're in the middle of the ocean, and you need to have a trusted team. A team needs to work in the Navy. And that's something I loved about working in the Navy. You had this team around you. And but all this time when I'm trying to carry on and do all the workups with everyone else and enjoying those sort of wartime exercises, I was bullied and harassed on the ship. I was intimidated. I was threatened with my life by a fellow officer. He was having a dig at chaplains and saying really bad things about all these chaplains I worked with, and I know that they weren't like that. And I just couldn't work him out, but I just had to continue to do what I could do and be there for the ship's company. And every time I went to try to talk to the captain about it, he would walk in. Like I couldn't even go, and he's the only person on the ship I could talk to. I allowed that to be only internally in me. I couldn't get it out. It's hard to carry on every day for 7 months after going through something like that. I also had people come and tell me about other bullying stuff the same person did to them. So I knew I wasn't alone after that happened, but it still was so hard to just continue. And every time I came off the ship, I felt the freedom and release of that for a weekend, and then had to go back on the Monday and go back again for 2-3 weeks and do it all again. And by the time I got to the end of the 7 months, I just fell off the ship in a total mess, and I just couldn't function. I had, insomnia for 5-6 nights. I hadn't slept at all at the end. His threatening voice just kept on going round and round in my head, and it was just, I actually was back to where I was as a 16-year-old, just wanting to die. And I didn't know how I got there. I loved every part of my life. I had no stresses at that point other than all what this man did to me. And I really fell apart.
Mel didn't feel like she could tell the Navy she was suicidal, as they would medically discharge her and she would lose her career. Nonetheless, from all her years as a chaplain, she knew that she had to share it with someone to keep herself safe.
I hung out with a friend for a while, like a pastor friend actually, the night that I was going to, I had a plan, and he rang me out of the blue and felt that he needed to call me. I left my mobile at home and they were ringing me and checking to see if I was okay. I got home, saw the missed call, and my friend Mike had left me this beautiful message of hope, and all I could think of is I want to die. I can't keep going. I can't. I just had nothing left in me to keep going, no resources left. But I thought I'll wait until I can contact Mike. And if it wasn't for Mike calling, I don't think I would have had the capacity in me at that point to reach out to somebody. It always had been, someone had always come to me and turned up. And this again is someone turned up and listened at a point of reaching out. And they rang me back at 9:00, Mike. And the first thing I knew I had to tell him was that I had to tell him about my plan. And he was like, okay, you're coming over here right now and you're staying with my family tonight. And I'm like going, no, I need to sleep. I want my own bed. I want my own space. I just need that. And so I promised him I'd stay safe, and then I'll just try to sleep, and I'll contact him 8:00 the next morning. And I did. I stayed true to my word, as I do. And I turned up at the base at 7, which I need to do, you have to. And I could hardly talk or walk. I still didn't sleep, even in my own bed. So now I'm bordering on 6-7 nights, no sleep at all. And I went and saw my senior chaplain, and I said, I just need to have some sleep. I haven't slept for a while. And he didn't really look at where I was standing, like how I was, like how real sickly I would have looked. And I walked to work. I used to ride my motorbike to work through the city because it was easy. And I walked to work, and I was just like, I think it's safer if I don't ride my bike. And I got to work, and then I got the day off just to regroup myself. And because I basically only had Sunday off. And then I went in, and I walked up to where Mike was, where he's working for the day. And I hung out with him for 24 hours in the day and life of Mike. And it was and he didn't let me go anywhere without. He went to committee meetings in churches, and I would be sitting in the background in the lounge. One time I had to ask him to go to the toilet, and he wanted to check everything on me because he had lost people before. Not that I could ever do that to him, but I felt really safe during that time. But in a space, I talked to him recently, and he said that in his 20 years of counselling as a pastor, he has never seen someone so messed up and bad, like that you hadn't slept, that the way you were thinking. He knew that I was just in really, really bad tough space, and could see that, which we never talked about that at the time. But he saved my life and he got me through. And then we realised after 24 hours the next morning, and I still didn't sleep at his place, that he goes, we have to tell the Navy. We have no choice. And so I said, well, can you come with me? I don't think I could face them alone. And he actually came in to base and went through a medical meeting. And then I got sent off to hospital and basically taken my uniform, my job away for 12 months. And I lost my deployment. Everything that I had gone through for those 7 months all felt like, well, what was that all about? Why did I have to go live through all that, and in order for it all to be taken away?
Thank you so much to Mel Baker for sharing the third part of her incredible story. Tune in next week for the final episode to hear how Mel rose from the ashes once again. Mel has written a book about her life. It's the first in a trilogy. It's called Sleeping Under the Bridge, and you can find more details in the show notes. And if you need support after listening to this episode, Lifeline is available on 13 11 14. And if you or someone you know has been impacted by sexual assault, domestic or family violence, you can call 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or visit 1800respect.org.au. Both of those resources are also in the show notes. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening to this episode of Finding Hope. I'd love to hear your feedback. You can send me an email, a review, or share it with your friends. Stories are always better when they're shared, and you never know what you can learn from someone else's journey. And if you or someone you know has a story of hope to share and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. For now, I'll leave you with this verse. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Psalm 34, verses 18 to 19. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.